This is VSiN At The Track, the road to the Preakness Stakes. Now here's your hosts, Mike Somich and Aaron Halterman.
Welcome back in, everybody. VSiN At The Track, road to the Preakness Stakes, Aaron. That's right. We are not skipping the second jewel of the Triple Crown. We're going to keep rolling on here. And we've got a jam-packed show today. As always, we've got breaking news that is happening in real time. We'll talk a little about Rodriguez and everything going on there during the second segment when we talk through the Preakness Stakes. We're going to prep the Peter Pan Stakes in the third segment as well. And, you know, we had a little success last weekend at the track. I don't know if you know this, but I hit the Superfecta in the Derby and wasn't out there very much. We're going to talk about Superfectas and kind of how we work through that, how we structure those tickets, and when we want to bet them as well. Because I think that's a big part of playing these Superfectas too, is just choosing the right races to be betting into that pool. But we got to start here, right, with the Kentucky Derby, a recap of what happened last weekend in the Run for the Roses. And in case you're under a rock, Sovereignty, able to win the Kentucky Derby, pays just short of $18. Journalism runs second. A late charging Baeza ends up running third. And Final Gambit gets up for fourth place there. And before we go into the news around the Kentucky Derby and coming out of it, let's talk a little bit about the race first. What were your first takeaways from this year's Kentucky Derby?
It was a fantastic race. Anybody that was watching us live on Saturday knows that we were pretty excited. You were very excited for hitting that Superfecta, but overall, it was a great race. As a racing fan, that's kind of what you wanted to see. You wanted to see the best horses show up and run their race and give us a thrill down the stretch, and that's exactly what we got. We got Journalism sitting in a really good spot. He turned for home. He looked like he was going to be tough to beat. And then you start scaling back to the horses that might be coming on behind him. And here comes Sovereignty. And you knew, at least I did, as soon as I picked up Sovereignty into my eyesight, I said, ooh, this is going to be a horse race now, because he's moving very smoothly as well. And really, for most of that stretch, you felt like it was a two-horse race. Baeza got out late, kind of got pinned in a little bit, and they came running late. But it was a very successful Derby, even though we had the slop, and sometimes that can be weird. It really wasn't for this one. The horses that we thought were pretty good showed up, and they performed like we thought they would, and that's always great on the big days.
Yeah, you mentioned the off track. I was a little worried after the Pat Day Mile that we were going to see speed favoring track. We saw a horse go 22.44 and still be able to pull away and win that race. But the pace materialized like we expected in the Kentucky Derby. We saw 5 or 6 horses that all wanted to be forwardly placed, get out of the gate, set that quick pace, the half mile in 46-1, a very fast half mile, especially considering the conditions. And it's set up for closers to be able to come from the back of the pack and be able to get the win there. And when we're looking through this race, I mean, first off, you got to talk about the trip Sovereignty got. It was a phenomenal ride by Junior Alvarado. He saves ground on the first turn, able to wheel out and just keep the horse out of trouble. We'll talk about some of the trouble trips, but what you're going to see as the common denominator is the horses on the outside didn't have trouble. Anyone who tried to go inside, they got themselves in trouble, and Alvarado did a great job of being inside on the first turn and then wheeling out on the second turn.
Oh, it was a master class. He was unbelievable in this race. I said it, on Sunday. I said it was a three master classes in this race. The jockey Junior Alvarado made every move. And sometimes you get lucky, but sometimes you're also good. And it was a blend of the both. Like, he did everything right. Everything was perfect. And then Belmont getting Sovereignty to run his biggest race on the biggest day. We talked about that for a couple of weeks. It happened. He ran so much better than he had previously been running. And then the horse, I mean, you asked the horse to, move a little bit earlier than he usually does, talking about Sovereignty. And then sometimes when you ask a horse to move a little early, they don't have a lot left in the tank late, but Sovereignty did. He had plenty left in the tank. So it was a masterclass for all three of those individuals. But you said it, and if you kind of want to talk about like Derby luck, right? Sometimes when you stay inside, you might get through and you get that short trip and you kind of slingshot to the front. It just didn't happen in this day. All those horses that stayed inside and tried to save ground, they all got bottled up. And like you said, Sovereignty, Baeza, Final Gambit, they were free and clear. And look what happened. They didn't get bottled up at all. They never had to stop.
Yeah, I mean, you look back at the past Derby winners. We saw Rich Strike ride the rail to victory. Last year, Mystic Dan stays on the rail, gets through. They call it gambling, a gambling ride, right? Riding the pine. And it either goes very well or very poorly. This year is a little more choppy for those horses that decide to stay on the inside. Journalism, much like Sovereignty, stayed on the rail in the first turn, wheels out on the second turn, able to get to the lead and not really face any trouble. You mentioned Baeza. I think it's at least worth noting Pratt, this was a very Angel of Empire type ride to me when I watched that race, that Kentucky Derby with Mage and Angel of Empire, 2 fills, and then watched this one as well, because he and Sovereignty around the second turn were basically in the same position. Sovereignty 4 wide, Baeza 2 wide. Baeza has forced to stay on the inside. We see that speed that we talked about backing up, and that speed backed right up into Baeza, and so he had to kind of downshift into third gear and then get loose and reshift up. If he doesn't downshift, do you think, I'm not sure he wins the race, but do you think he ends up past Journalism?
Oh, there's absolutely no question in my mind he ends up second without any doubt whatsoever. And kind of what happened was right when Baeza was starting and Flavien Prat was going to swing Baeza out to start to make that big move, Journalism came right up beside him, right? And he looked and he's like, oh no. And he had to wait a second. And it was like that 1, 2, 3 seconds there. And so he had to wait to Journalism to clear. It 100% cost him second. I think it would have been very interesting for first, because imagine if those two are moving in a tandem versus what happened, which was Sovereignty moving, ahead of him, 3 or 4 lengths. They only, Baeza only lost by like a length and a half, right? So if they move in a tandem, does Baeza out gallop him to the wire? I'm not sure. I think that's a healthy debate. I think it could go either way, but I don't think there's any debate. I think if he gets out when he wants to get out there, I think he does get second, and I think he ruins your Superfecta if that was the case. So I'm glad he didn't do that, right?
Yeah, me too. That got a little tighter than I thought it would when we were watching the stretch. I was not thinking that Baeza had a shot at catching Journalism, although it was very, very close there. Now, quickly, 2 horses I want to highlight who I thought got the worst of it from a trip perspective. The first one, Burnham Square, who I think I underestimated. Burnham Square was very good down in Florida, and I think we can make the argument now that Florida was definitely 1A, if not 1, in the circuits, with California being the other circuit that was dominant through this process. And Burnham Square was closer to the pace on the rail than what we've usually seen in the past. He got a brutal trip with that speed backing up into him, was sitting in like the 7th, 8th place, got shuffled all the way back to 15th, re-rallied, got cut off again. The other one that I think was interesting here was Tistastic, and we talked about Tistastic quite a bit coming from the back. He got beat to 2 or 3 holes around the turn and in the final stretch, and that caused him to just have to absolutely stop. I think both of those are horses you want to take a look at again in their future races. Was there anyone else that jumped out to you, or was it those 2 as well?
Yeah, I do want to echo your Burnham Square thoughts, because I'm right there with you. I rewatched it 3 or 4 times. I'm like, ooh, I probably should have played that horse somewhere. Even though it worked out for us, you do learn. It's like, he was ready to make a move. And really, for a lot of that race, Somich, it looked like he was in the perfect spot. And then all of a sudden, he wasn't, and that's what can happen in horse racing, especially the Derby, just that half second and you're done. Tistastic couldn't agree more. They tried to have the ground saving inside trip. It just didn't work out. No racing luck there. I don't think Sandman was winning the race, but I thought he had enough trouble, and he got himself into a lot of trouble again, like we kind of thought he would. This wasn't all just bad luck. He was erratic like we thought, but I think you get him in a normal race with normal situations. I do think he'll be there to run 2nd, 3rd, 4th and kind of fill that out. Don't give up on him. So he had trouble, but it was kind of his own doing, where the other 2 that you talked about, I'll just echo. Yeah, they had trouble, and it was kind of a lot of bad luck, especially Burnham Square. Because like I said, I thought he was in a great spot, and then all of a sudden he wasn't.
Yeah, it was a tough trip for him, and what we saw from the Florida horses makes me believe he's probably a little bit better than what I was expecting heading into that race. Want to give a shout out to the YouTube chatter. You can find us live on @VSiN Live over on YouTube. Robin joining the show said she loved the show, new to it, but she's a fan already. Hit the trifecta in the Derby. Great to hear that. If you watched the show 6 weeks ago, got to give us a little flowers here. Journalism 1, Sovereignty 2 for both of us, and Baeza was in the horses to watch list. With Grande as well, by the way, who I think would have run well here. So all over this Derby, even 6 weeks ago, great to be able to see these new people getting into the sport, being able to cash some tickets. And if you're looking to cash some tickets, make sure you head over to First Bet here. Ready to get in the action? First Bet's got you covered. Sign up to access exclusive promotions and bet on hundreds of races every single day, right from your phone or your computer. Visit firstbet.com. That's the number 1. STBET.com and use promo code VSiN200 to score a 20% rebate on all your wagers for the first 60 days up to $200. Don't miss out. Start betting today at firstbet.com. Now, Aaron, the news coming out of this race is obviously Sovereignty not going to run in the Preakness. And it's a bummer. The Preakness actually did have enough pace where I think it would have set up decently for Sovereignty in that race based on the entries. And again, we'll talk about that here next segment. Are you surprised we're not seeing sovereignty? And do you think this is the tipping point where we actually see racing try and space these races out more so we get superstars to run in all three?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I was out to dinner Saturday night, out for a few drinks to celebrate, and I got on my phone and read the article, like the post-Derby article, and just the comments from trainer Belmont on sovereignty. You know, I told my business partner, my wife was with me as well. I said, I don't think we're getting a Triple Crown bid. It just didn't sound like they wanted to run. And Belmont said, look, I'm looking at a whole career. I'm not looking at 5 weeks with this horse. We're trying to win, races all year long. So I respect it. Belmont not great on 2 weeks rest as well. Only 4 winners out of 58 starts in the last 5 years. So I get it. Something needs to be done. I don't know if they'll do it or not, but I do think it is time to spread these races out. I don't really want to. I don't really want to ruin that tradition, but I do sit here and think, look, all sports evolve with the times, right? Basketball's evolved, baseball's evolved. They're all rule changes and major changes to change the game. And you may hate it, you may love it, but you have to evolve. And I think that's what racing is going to have to do. They're going to have to do something. It needs to be looked at. Decisions need to be made. I'm not confident that they can all work together, but I do think they're going to have to do something.
Yeah, you hit the problem of this is that it's multiple corporations who are all publicly traded having to work together to adjust these dates, and it also affects the fall schedule, right? You've got the Haskell in July, you've got the in August. You got all these races that have to change if you do decide to change how you're going to set up the Kentucky Derby. And horse racing doesn't move quickly. We'll just put it that way. So we'll see if we're able to make a change. Stick with us here. VSiN at the Track, Road to the Preakness. We're going to talk about that Preakness when we come back. Well, that was a good Kentucky Derby, Aaron. Cashing some bets, enjoyed it. It is a bummer we're not going to get sovereignty back in the Preakness. And we're going to talk about the Preakness in the field we're going to get. Obviously, a big defection. We'll get to that news here in the next segment as well. But it sets up for a nice Belmont. Maybe the Belmont is the highlight of the Triple Crown after the Kentucky Derby this year.
Yeah, it absolutely could be. It absolutely could be. It kind of that's what's been happening. The Preakness, even though we did get the Kentucky Derby winners the last couple of years, the Preakness has still been kind of light, right? It really has. And it's been light for a few years now. This is not a new problem. Now, not having the Derby winner is definitely a worse blow than normal. But it's a Preakness problem. I don't know what they can do. And like I tried to allude to a little bit, and like you said perfectly, 3 different, outfits own all 3 different tracks. There is no governing body. How are these people that are competitors going to work together to figure this out? I don't have a lot of confidence.
The one thing I think is a positive, Pimlico, the racetrack the Preakness is being held at, is undergoing major renovations. It's going to be closed for multiple years. It gives them an opportunity to do this at Laurel and change the dates. And we'll see if the Preakness decides to run after the Belmont, what they decide to try and do to kind of change the schedule. The Belmont's basically said, we're not adjusting. We're 5 weeks after the Derby, deal with it. So it's the Preakness that it feels like would have to make the move here, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that and realize it's not going to be the Preakness moving to June. It's going to be, if they're going to move it, it's going to have to be July. They're going to have to be the third leg of it. And, I don't love it, but maybe it can work. I'm open to give anything a try at this point.
I'd rather have the Stars running all 3.
You're tuned in to VSiN at the Track, right here on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Welcome back here to VSiN at the Track, Road to the Preakness Stakes. I am Mike Somich. He is Aaron Halterman. Thank you to everybody who's joining us over on @VSiN Live on the YouTube channel. You can catch the replay over on all the VSiN channels Saturday morning, 9 p.m. Eastern. And Aaron, big news. We teased this a little bit on the Kentucky Derby show. We're going to be back at it next Saturday. Live show for the Preakness will be on SiriusXM channel 158, VSiN proper, all the terrestrial radio stations, and once again on Mad Dog Sports Radio as well. So make sure you tune in, enjoy and bet the Preakness with us. Hopefully we can stay as hot as we were for the Kentucky Derby. Now, Aaron, we just talked about the fact that we're not going to see Sovereignty here in the Preakness. That's a bummer. Journalism, we're not sure about yet. We thought we were going to see Rodriguez, and literally 2 minutes before we started this show, per DRF, we get the news that Rodriguez now out of the Preakness. So another major defection here. Rodriguez not going to run in the Preakness. We both immediately said, oh, now it makes more sense why Goal Oriented was entered in this race, who ran on Kentucky Derby Day. So quick 2-week turnaround here, but also trained by Bob Baffert there, Aaron. How does the change here? And we're looking at the current possible entries here. American Promise for Dwayne Lucas, Bullard in there for Michael McCarthy, Clever Again for Steve Asmussen, Goal Oriented for Bob Baffert, Gosker for Brennan Walsh, Heart of Honor, who's coming over from the UAE Derby, Journalism. We'll see. I think one of the McCarthys goes. I think the other doesn't. Pay Billy, who won the local prep here, for Michael Gorham, and then River Thames for Todd Pletcher. How does the exit of Rodriguez change how you were looking at this race just 30 minutes ago?
Oh, it changes it a lot. And yeah, I got the news from somebody on the back end here at VSiN, and I'm like, wow, I did not hear that. So it changes it a lot. And look, this race is hanging by a thread, and the thread is journalism. If journalism does not come to the Preakness, I don't know what this race is. Is this this feels like a grade 3 prep race in January, quite honestly, for a prep race for the Kentucky Derby more than a grade 1 Preakness. So it's hanging by a thread. Journalism, like I said, he is a threat. Also, if you want to play journalism in this race now, you have to accept the fact he's probably going to be absolutely unplayable to win, and you're going to have to get creative with your wagers. And maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more on the last segment, Somich. But look, as far as how this race goes, with Rodriguez out, it's all about journalism for me. I do think there's still a lot of pace in the race. I think it'll set up just fine for journalism. Journalism has no horse even close to a Sovereignty or even a Baeza or even a Final Gambit. I'll go that far to try to hold off here. He just got to show up, and he has to run just a decent race, and he is the winner based on the probables that we have right now. If you're trying to look away from him, I guess the other Bob Baffert Goal Oriented that you kind of talked about. Look, I had a huge wager on this horse 2 weeks ago. Well, I guess it'd be 5 days ago on Kentucky Derby Day. He ran in the third race, which was just an allowance race. He all of a sudden looks like a decent horse in this spot. When he finished the race that day, Somich, we were kind of watching it together, talking back and forth. We weren't overly impressed with this horse. At least I wasn't. But now he's in this field, and it's like, well, this field isn't great. So I don't know if he's your alternative in this spot, but this is not a great field.
I am going to stay positive here. I want journalism out. For the fact that, for the exact reason that you just said, he's going to be like 1-5 in this race, 2-5 in this race, wildly short price. I want no part of that. You're right. We'll talk about how to deal with that if in the Superfecta, if you'd like to play that bet in this race, in the fourth segment here. But I would rather see journalism say, you know what? Let's go have some fun in the Belmont. Let's take on Baeza. Let's take on Sovereignty. Let's take on the heavy hitters and run this back 3 weeks after with a fully rested journalism and see if we are the best horse, because I do think journalism got the worst of the setup there, being closer to the pace than Baeza or Sovereignty was in the Derby. So I'd be very, very fascinated to see those three horses run back. Oh, by the way, it also means you're going to get a better price on Sovereignty if you like him. It's going to mean you're going to get a better price on Baeza if you like him. So for me, taking journalism out of this makes both of these races better betting races. So we'll see if he ends up going. I'm rooting for journalism to be out. And I realize it does knock the star power here. I totally get that. But, we're on VSiN. I like to bet on horses. I think it's better for betting if we don't have journalism sitting here as a 1-5, 2-5 type horse. And I realize, you lose some juice. And I get that. But at the same time, you gain juice in Belmont, and it makes both of these races a better betting race. And so we'll see if we end up getting journalism. I think the Rodriguez scratch, very interesting, because that takes pace out of this race. And we were talking about this, Tuesday. It seemed like there was just going to be a boatload of pace in this year's version of the Preakness. You've got American Promise. You've got Clever Again. Goal Oriented wants to stalk, not necessarily be on the lead, but he was someone who had a little bit of pace. You've got River Thames, who's been on the lead before. And then you inject Rodriguez, who 100% was going to the front in this race. Now the pace, to me, a little murkier. A horse like Clever Again, I think, becomes a lot more interesting after you lose Rodriguez, because if American Promise for some reason doesn't get to the front and it's Clever Again who does, I think that makes Clever Again having opportunity to be able to upset the apple cart here. And American Promise, I think, benefits from this as well, because one of the two could now be clear speed in a race where I thought neither of them had a prayer to be clear speed just 30 minutes ago.
I would 100% echo your thoughts of I'm going to go with a horse that I think is going to be near the front if journalism isn't in the race. And, whether, like you said, that might be an American Promise, it might be a Gosker, it might be a goal-oriented, maybe Clever. Clever again. We'll just have to kind of look at who actually enters because, 2 minutes ago, I thought Rodriguez was in the race, right? So that's why we'll do a show next week to kind of preview this thing once we know the field. But I'm right there with you. I'm going to go probably a little bit of a price and a horse that's forwardly placed if journalism is out. But the one thing we know, journalism is tactical, right? So if the pace is slow, I still think he's going to be okay. Without who would that have hurt a horse like Sovereignty, who is way from the back? So that would be a different story. But journalism is tactical, and again, I don't really think he's a horse that the pace is going to get him beat. So, again, I do see what you're saying. Like, it's going to be a much better betting race if he's out because you could, I mean, sometimes you say this next phrase I'm going to say and you don't really mean it, but I really do mean it this time. If journalism is out of this race, you could make a case for every horse in the Preakness to win. Like, it is a wide open event. They all have some positives. They all have a lot of negatives as well. So, you could go back and forth there. So it is a much better betting race. And I think it would be very fascinating to see who the favorite would be if journalism's out and what that price would be, because I would think like the favorite at this point without journalism would be like 5-2 or 3-1, maybe.
Well, that's why I like the idea of him out. You're going to get a better, more interesting betting board if that does end up happening. I will not put you on the spot and ask you to make a case for Heart of Honor because it's not fair as a co-host to do so. But that would be a tough one for me. Second in the UAA Derby, lost to Admire Daytona, who finished 20th in the Kentucky Derby, or 19th in the Kentucky Derby. Sorry about that. So that would be the one where I'd be like, maybe we'll hit the brakes. But everyone else, I do agree with you, I think has a legitimate shot. And when I look at this list, I think the two horses specifically fascinating how they are going to get bet. The first one, American Promise, who was 30-1 in the Kentucky Derby, was on the pace, and we saw every horse that was near the pace except for Owen Almighty. Hats off to you, Owen Almighty. You ran amazing in that race, considering you were 3 wide on the first turn and still somehow ran 5th in that spot when I thought he'd quit. I thought he'd fold like a lawn chair around the far turn, but he kept going for him. American Promise did fold, didn't run very well, but he was a hot horse. I mean, 30-1 on the morning line, bet down to 12-1 on Kentucky Derby Day. I'm very interested to see whether or not people just say, hey, he was close to the pace, he never had a chance, I'm willing to throw that one out, I'm willing to bet on him again, or if this is a horse that really loses steam at the window because of that Kentucky Derby effort.
Well, he's got D. Wayne Lucas as a trainer as well. And D. Wayne Lucas won this race, talking about the Preakness last year with Seize the Gray. So I think he'll get bet again. And that's kind of my problem with American Promise. He's going to be one of those horses, like you said, that's going to be towards the front. But if this horse was bet down to 12-1 for some crazy reason in the Kentucky Derby, and we kept saying that the day of, we're like, this is nuts. I don't know why. We're not saying it's impossible he can win, but he should be way higher than 12-1 based on what he's done. Well, what's he going to be in the Preakness? Say journalism's not there. Hell, he might be 4-1 or something like that. And that's where I don't want any part of him. So that's going to be the interesting thing, I think, to just kind of keep an eye on. Okay, because with journalism out, like I said, it's kind of wide open. So then it becomes, okay, who do we think can get the best trip? And out of those horses we think are going to get good trips, who's the value? Who's the horse that's really going to stand out and go, he's 5-1 and he shouldn't be? And that's kind of the style of the race it is. Sometimes when you handicap a race, you go, hey, I know this horse can be short, but I don't think this horse is losing, so I got to get creative with my wagers. Where here, you just kind of have to get creative with your handicapping because you can make so many different cases for so many different horses.
Yeah, you really can. And that to me is what makes this race interesting without journalism. Now, with journalism, I think all of a sudden you put him on top in trifectas, superfectas, and you try and play it very, very short. You try and find skinny ways to get to those tickets that you're able to cash multiple times, right? So if the trifecta is 50 cents, maybe you play a $5 trifecta and journalism's alone in the first spot. You've got one horse in the second spot and maybe 2 or 3 in the third spot. And you're really saying, okay, journalism's a free square. I'm playing an exacta as a trifecta, right? And you look at it from that manner. And that's something that we're going to talk a little bit more about during the fourth segment. But we're actually not done prepping this Preakness race because I still have a horse I want to talk about. And Aaron, we've got to go to break. So on the other side here, we're going to talk a little bit more Preakness, specifically one horse in this field we haven't chatted about that I got to bring up. And then we'll talk about the Peter Pan coming up from Belmont at the Big A on Saturday. Stick with us here, VSiN at the track. Do you know which horse I want to talk about, Aaron?
Bullard is my guess.
No, it's not. Although I do kind of want to talk about Bullard, so I will bring up Bullard. But I have a horse that I would, if journalism's out of this race, I've got a horse I'm running to the window to bet.
Oh,
so I'm very
Bullard,
interested to see if we get journalism or not. Well, I would be interested in Bullard. I just don't know what to do after. Like, he was too bad to believe in the Lexington, right?
Right.
So the question is, like, do you play the bounce back there? Is McCarthy putting him here and taking journalism out a show of faith from McCarthy? And how do you kind of handicap the intentions of the trainer? I think is a big question with Bullard.
It feels like to me, it's like, hey, I'll send Bullard if we can't send journalism because we want to run somebody in it. But I would say, obviously, if journalism shows up, I don't think Bullard's going to be in the race. So, yeah, I agree. I'm very interested now because it seems like we talked about a lot of these horses. So, is it the Pletcher horse?
We did, but we have not talked about the one yet. And so I'm going to save it for the show.
Okay.
I also have a journalism question for you as well, because I may be dismissing the idea that he runs in the Preakness and the Belmont. And maybe I shouldn't dismiss that idea in my head, especially if he breezes in this race, right? So I think we should at least mention that as well.
Yep, I agree. And that's very McCarthy. His comments after the Derby kind of felt like, hey, we've been prepping them to run in all three. Like they were like, yeah, Preakness, we're really looking at it hard. So I was like, oh, okay.
You're tuned in to VSiN At The Track, right here on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Welcome back in here, VSiN At The Track, road to the Preakness. And Aaron, we talked the full segment about the Preakness, and then we were in the break, and I just have all these other questions that keep popping into my head that I think are completely relevant. So before jumping into the Peter Pan here, let's continue the Preakness talk, and I'll start it out with this. In my head, and this may be me being short-sighted here, I was thinking it is the Preakness or the Belmont for journalism, not the Preakness and the Belmont for journalism. What do you think the chances are that he runs in both of these races?
Well, I think there's a chance of it. Right after the race, I read the article and I talked to you about how I hated what Bill Mott said as far as his prospects of running Sovereignty in the Preakness. But when you read what Michael McCarthy, the trainer of journalism, said, he was a lot more kind of willing to talk about it and upbeat about the Preakness. And that does kind of make me think, well, maybe he'll go to the Preakness, and if the horse does well and he's feeling well, maybe they'll do the Belmont. Maybe they'll do all three with this horse. I think you probably logically are looking at it as like, hey, it is probably going to be one or the other. And that I would lean towards your line of thinking, but I don't think it's impossible that we see him in all three. So especially if he shows up at Pimlico and it's a pretty easy race for him, he doesn't get, real tired from it, you could see him back at Belmont.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully if he is in here, he airs. Because then, and by airs, I mean he wins by open lengths, doesn't have to go to the bottom of the tank, able to save something so that we do have the opportunity to see him back in 3 weeks. And if he is out, we haven't talked about this horse yet, but I will be running to the window to bet River Thames. I think River Thames is an absolute standout in this spot if we end up not seeing journalism. We talked about the pace with Clever Again, American Promise. They're both going to be forward. River Thames is a horse that likes to sit right behind that pace. And he was in the Florida circuit. And we talked about this. The Florida horses were awesome in that race. They are a circuit that I think has really leveled up throughout this entire process. And California, obviously, very good with the two horses we saw come out there. But at the same time, I mean, the winner is Sovereignty. Tapon Street, I think would have been right there had he been in the race. He would have been someone who was on all of my tickets. We saw Burnham Square run very well there. And then you've got River Thames, who lost in the comeback effort from Sovereignty by just a couple lengths. I think he is very, very interesting here if it is a journalism less Preakness. And I'm probably playing a pretty big exact the journalism into River Thames if journalism's here. Yeah,
the only worry I have, and it's a weak race, so this worry may be okay is how far does that horse really want to run? This is a mile and 3/16 race. He got caught by the Derby winner going a mile and a 16th. That's okay. I'm not really worried about that. But he ran in the bluegrass last time out, and he went a mile and an eighth, and he didn't really look like he wanted to go much further than that. He got third in that race. So I don't know. I'm on the fence with him. I do think he is the class of the field if journalism is out. I definitely think that. And I think he's a versatile horse. I think, if nobody really goes to the front, he can take them gate to wire. And if they do go crazy up front, I think he can sit just off the speed. So I'm kind of with you there. I like his versatility. I like where he's going to sit in the race. Can he finish strong enough is going to be my biggest question mark with him, because that mile and 3/16, hey, it's not a mile and a quarter, but that's still longer than he's raced before, and it's much longer than a race that he's ever won in his life.
Yeah, the distance will be the big concern there for River Thames. I think he's better than these. I mean, and so it's not as big of an issue here for me as it would be if this was, more of the Derby horses in and they had less rest. So I do think River Thames interesting in this spot. We'll see how this draw happens. The draw for the Preakness going to happen on Monday. Make sure you check out VSiN on Tuesday. I'll have an article up about the Preakness draw, how it affects the pace and what pace we're expecting from that spot. And then we'll be back next Friday here, VSiN at the Track, 2:10 Eastern, 11:10 Pacific, to run through the Preakness Stakes, some of the undercard stakes, as well as our best bets from both Friday and Saturday, and of course our best bets from the Preakness Stakes. And then of course we'll be on Saturday as well for 2 hours leading up to the Preakness Stakes. Maybe Aaron will actually fly out to Las Vegas and join me for the show this week. We'll see. He's not telling me. He's not giving it up. So we'll find out if Aaron actually wants to make the trek to beautiful Las Vegas and play a little Sigma Derby in the D. Now, we do have, we'll call it a Belmont prep tomorrow. We've seen the Peter Pan produce Belmont winners, Archangelo, the most recent. We've got a 10-horse field tomorrow, race number 11 from Belmont at the Big A. A very interesting race. Your favorite here going to be the number 8 horse, Captain Cook, for Rick Dutrow. Manny Franco is going to ride. And after that, you've got Hill Road, who's 5-2, a Chad Brown horse. He's got 2 in here. But once you get past those 2, I mean, this is a wide open race. You can make cases for, I would say, 8 of the 10 of these, and the 2 I'm not going to make a case for, both 50-1. To me, this is just very, very open, depending on which direction you want to go. Aaron, who are you going to put on top here?
Yeah, I'm going to put the number 8 Captain Cook on top. I do think this is kind of the class of the field here. And look, you talked about Rodriguez, who scratched out of the Preakness. Well, last time out, Captain Cook was tracking Rodriguez nicely in the Wood Memorial, just a half length behind, sitting in second. Captain Cook made a big run, and he just couldn't get past Rodriguez, and he just kind of said, okay, I quit, basically, and backed up. That's not going to happen here. I think Captain Cook's on the lead. Speed is playing very well at Belmont at the Big A right now. This meet just opened a few days ago, but basically what the racetrack is Aqueduct, and Aqueduct does play to speed usually during this time of year, and it certainly is so far. So I like that with Captain Cook as well. So I do like him on top quite a bit. I do think he's the one they're going to have to catch. And I'm just skeptical of the talent level of the rest of the horses that are going to be behind him and if they can catch him. So Captain Cook on top for me. I'm going to get some prices involved underneath, but on top, I am going to go number 8, Captain Cook.
Yeah, you mentioned Belmont at the Big A, which is at Aqueduct. They just changed the name because Belmont currently under renovations, adding a Tapeta course to that track and revamping the grandstand there. He's going to be your favorite. The second choice, Hill Road, is going to be coming from way off the pace for Chad Brown at 5-2. This is the horse I think you can leave out. If Hill Road wins, I'm okay with losing. We have a flood warning right now in New York City, which is where Aqueduct is located. So you've got a lot of rain on the track today. It's going to be a sloppy or muddy track. That does elevate one specific horse that you like more, so I'll let you talk about him. We do disagree on the one here, Vassimo. I like Vassimo quite a bit for Todd Pletcher. Irad Ortiz riding. I thought he looked very good in his first 2 efforts, and then he went down to Louisiana, ran at Fairgrounds in 2 of their big Kentucky Derby preps, and A, was overmatched, and B, the pace in both of those races was just messed up. It was funky. It was really fast with Magnitude going gate to wire, getting a 108 buyer that felt like it came out of nowhere, and then you saw an absolute collapse where Tistastic won the Louisiana Derby. This is a much more even race than what I think Vassimo is coming out of. I think the 5-1 price is pretty nice. I do have the 8 and the 1 pretty close together. So if I'm betting the race, I'd rather take 5-1 on the 1 than 2-1 on the 8. I do think they are the 2 standouts here. You're not as big of a fan as Vassimo. Why not?
Yeah, I don't know that he's ever beat anybody that's very good, and that's my deal with Vassimo. He beat a horse named Rapture on debut. Rapture did not turn out to be very good. He went to Tampa Bay Downs for his second race, and he raced against horses that weren't very good. But hey, give him credit, 2 wins. But then he stepped up to Kentucky Derby Prep competition at Fairgrounds in 2 races that were tougher. And he didn't do a lot of running. He just was kind of off the board and never really saw much of him in either one of those races, especially last time out in the Louisiana Derby. So I'm not a huge fan of his. I am a fan of his stablemate, though, the number 6 Uncaged. This horse is 8-1 on the morning line. Also, like I said, trade by Todd Pletcher. And you kind of mentioned it. He's won 2 out of 3 races. The 2 races he won, they were both on muddy tracks. So if we do get that rain that's called for, this is the horse that I think is going to benefit from the most from it. Talking about Uncaged. And let me tell you another thing about this horse. He won a very tough maiden special weight on debut last year at Saratoga. It was a very tough race, and he was able to get the job done. He got hurt. He missed a lot of time. He came back, and he was poor in his first effort back from injury. But his second race back right here over this track was very sharp. And I thought, okay, he's rounding back into form. Now we've got the weather on our side as well. So the number 6 Uncaged for me, that's what I've got in second. And if we, depending on, scratches or what happens, I could even see myself playing him to win if we do get that rain, because that is definitely a big benefit for him.
Yeah, I agree with you. This was the horse that was kind of on my cut line. We do a late pick 5 show for Racing Dudes. You can find over at Racing Dudes YouTube. And this was one of the races we covered. And on there, I mentioned, look, I was between the 5 McAfee and the 6 Uncaged. And the weather definitely plays toward Uncaged here, because he is 2 for 2 over a sloppy track. He looked very good last time, second off the layoff over that style of track, and he's going to be able to run on again tomorrow. I think he makes some sense there. I do want to at least mention the number 3 here, Surfside Moon. This is a horse that first off the layoff ran in a Preakness prep at 1 1/8 at Laurel, and I thought actually ran pretty good. If you go 2 back, ran at Aqueduct, went the 1 1/8 distance, and ended up running second to Captain Cook that day. They were pretty close. I don't think this was a situation where Captain Cook just kind of blew him away. Now you're getting second off a layoff, a little more seasoning in the horse. I think Surfside Moon at 8-1, a little bit interesting as well. And then the 10 Lordship, what do you do with him? The other Chad Brown, 12-1 on the morning line. I think he makes a little sense. Any long shots that you like that you haven't mentioned yet here, Aaron?
Yeah, I think Lordship is kind of the one that makes the most sense. It's a horse that just has 1 race under the belt for Chad Brown. It was a pretty good race. Didn't face a lot of competition that race, right? He was expected to win, and he did it. Now let's see him step up in class, stretch out in distance. He kind of checks the boxes from a pedigree standpoint, and he did it the right way. He looked talented on debut. He's just got to step up. So that'd be the long shot I like. And I think you'll get, I don't know if you'll get 12-1, but I think you'll get a pretty decent price on it.
Stick with us here, VSiN at the Track, talking Superfectas when we come back. This is going to be an interesting Peter Pan to me. We generally see at least one horse go into the Belmont from this race. I feel like if Hill Road runs good at all, even a couple steps, let's say he runs 3rd in this race, somewhere around there, I think Brown sends him to Saratoga to try and win the Belmont at Saratoga, 1.25 miles instead of 1.5 miles, the normal distance there. I think that's an advantage for Hill Road as well. How many horses do you think end up in the Belmont from this field?
I really still think it's just going to be one. I get what you're saying about Hill Road, and I think that makes sense. He probably is going to go regardless, but I'll say one. I don't think this is the best running of the Peter Pan we've ever had. That's for sure. I was thinking about this, Somich. I wanted to ask you, is there a chance any of these horses are seeing what's happening with the Preakness field and say, you know what? Let's throw our name into that hat. Let's scratch out of the Peter Pan and go to the Preakness. Do you think that's a possibility?
I do. I wouldn't be shocked if there are, I don't know, 1 or 2 surprises when we get the actual Preakness entries out, where someone's like, hey, wait a second here. Especially if journalism defects, I expect we get 1 to 2 names that we weren't necessarily thinking, because it's like, wait a second. This is a Triple Crown race, a ton of money on the line. And this field is like you mentioned, it kind of feels like a grade 2, like early prep style grade 2. It's a gettable race, and horses, let's say Captain Cook, You don't have a Dutrow in there. Maybe he wants to ship him out there. Hill Road. Maybe Hill Road makes sense in the Preakness if you don't end up being there. So I'm interested to see if we do see scratches here, especially with the track that move horses over to the Preakness.
Yep.
You're tuned in to VSiN At The Track, right here on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Welcome back in here, VSiN At The Track. We are returning for home with the final segment here. I am Mike Somich. He is Aaron Halterman. If you missed any of the Preakness talk or the talk about the Peter Pan coming up over at Belmont at the Big A, hey, this show is archived over at VSiN Live on YouTube. You can always check it out there. We'll have a replay tomorrow on all of the VSiN proper channels as well at 9 o'clock Eastern in the morning. So make sure you check it out over there too. Aaron, we hit a Superfecta on Saturday. I don't know if you knew that. We were able to crush the Superfecta in the Kentucky Derby. A $24 ticket, which we gave out here just 1 week ago, pays $1,680. Congrats to everybody who followed along and had that. It was a phenomenal Kentucky Derby day. If you listened, hopefully you had the winner in Sovereignty. Hopefully you had the trifecta. We talked about Baeza and journalism all the time, and obviously that Superfecta ticket got home. But one of the things that really came out of this for me was people asking questions around the Superfecta. When do you bet it? How often do you bet it? How much do these tickets usually cost? I think it's a very relevant thing to discuss, especially after the hit last weekend. And I think it's important to talk about how you structure these as well, because a lot of people talk about Superfecta boxes. We'll talk about boxing those in a second, because I have a very strong opinion on whether or not that is a good or a bad idea. But before we go into it, I am someone who bets the Superfecta in one of three situations. The first one, the Kentucky Derby. It is a very unique race, Aaron. You've got 19 or 20 horses. It's a dollar denomination. It creates massive payouts. It's one of the races that I want to bet every single year. Situation number two is if I have a big-time favorite, and we'll talk about that with journalism shortly, that I think is a free square in first. And I like prices in second, or I think I can go very, very shallow in the second through fourth spots. And the third one is if I like a monster price, right? And I think that that's a very easy horse to put up top. And then the payouts for the Superfecta all of a sudden become ballooned because that favorite's on top. When do you like to bet Superfectas?
The biggest one for me is when I have a horse like journalism that could be in the Preakness that is a short price that I can't do anything with as betting to win. And I look at the exacta and I go, there's not a lot of value here with this exacta either. So let's try to juice up the payouts and let's try to, like you said, put the horse you love in the first spot. That's all you play in the first spot is just that horse that you love. And then you try to sprinkle in some long shots underneath. So usually how I like to do it is play the first horse, they're like top spot, that, the horse I love in the first spot, then put 3 horses in the second, 4 horses in the third. And depending on the field size, you maybe 4 horses again in the fourth, or if it's a large field, maybe 5 horses in that fourth spot for a $24 ticket for $1. And so that's kind of where I do it the most. The other thing you can kind of get, with as well is if you really like 2 horses, then you could play 2 horses in the first spot, 2 horses in the second spot, and then do something similar where you play, bigger prices in the third and the fourth spot.
Yeah, one of my important factors of when I'm deciding to play is, do I like all the favorites, right? If you like the top 4 favorites in the order, it's not a good race to play a Superfecta. You need to be able to have prices in there to be able to differentiate yourself from the general betting public, because if it's, when you're in horse racing, if there are 6 horses in a race, people will talk about the favorite being the A horse, the second choice being the B horse, the third choice being the C horse. If you bet a Superfecta A, B, C, D, right? So the top 4 picks, it's going to be bet more than it should be by the general wagering public as well. And so you have to find ways to be able to get around those. Now, again, the Derby Superfecta is unique to me because it's a $1 base denomination. And a lot of races, Aaron, that you see every single day, it's 10 cents to bet a Superfecta because it is much more difficult to hit than an exacta, than a win bet. You have to pick the first 4 horses across the wire to hit a Superfecta. The Derby Superfecta is $1. That, to me, makes it more interesting. When I bet Superfectas, I rarely bet 10 cents. I'm almost always betting at least $1. Generally, I'll have $5 Superfectas and be very, very short. And if my opinion is correct, it pays out. Do you like to bet 10-cent Superfectas, or are you generally betting more than 10 cents on this bet as well when you make it?
Yeah, no, I don't like to bet the 10-cent supers at all because you have to have major prices to get back what you kind of what my goal is when I'm betting races. So like say what a lot of people do is box 4 horses in a superfecta for 10 cents and it costs you $2.40 because you're playing 24 combinations, right? But the thing is, unless you've got some long prices in there, you might get back $8, $12, $15. You know what I mean? You've got to have big prices to do it. I'm not saying never do that. Like if you just want to play a lotto ticket and like, hey, let's put these 20 to 1s kind of in this box and see what happens. I mean, there's worse things you can do, but that's just kind of not my style, unless it's just a rare situation where I love horses like that. But no, I would rather play them for $1, $2 even, and try to be exact, like I said, in those top couple of spots. And then, like you said, if you've got 10 or 20 to 1 horses that you like Baeza was a great example, like Final Gambit for you, those are great examples. You liked those horses. You didn't necessarily think they could win, but you're like, hey, they're big prices, and I think they can beat some of these shorter prices for that 3rd and 4th spot. That's when it sets up. That's when it's good. I need to be exact up top. I need to get those, and then let the chips fall where they fall in that 3rd and 4th spot and try to get some of your longer prices involved.
Now, if you are looking to bet any superfectas, head over to firstbet.com there. Take your betting to the next level with First Bet, whether it's at Santa Anita, Gulfstream Park, Pimlico, Belmont at the Big A, or anywhere else across the country or the world. First Bet puts your action at your fingertips. Sign up at firstbet.com. That's the number 1, STBET.com, and use promo code VSiN200 to score a 20% rebate on all your wagers for the first 60 days, up to $200. Win or lose, you'll get money back. Don't miss out. Bet smarter today at firstbet.com. And now, Aaron, you brought up 2 things. So great job that I want to make sure I handle. First off, don't box superfectas. If that's the only ticket you're making, don't box your superfecta. But you should have, if you show me your tickets for a race, I should be able to tell you who you like. Most in the race, second most in the race, third most in the race. I should be able to know your opinion based on the tickets you hand me. If you hand me a 4-horse superfecta box, that means that you believe all 4 of those horses have the exact likelihood to be able to run in the money in the top 4 and also have the exact prices that differentiate them as the exact 4. That is zero possibility. Now, if you want to play a $1 superfecta and put 2 of them in 1st and 2nd, 2 of them in 3rd and 4th, and then play back a 10-cent superfecta box, okay, I get it. I now know who you like based off that $1 ticket. But boxing, to me, is a way to cost yourself money over the long term. It more often than not, pressing your opinion is worth much more than boxing up horses, and like for the one occasion where your 4th choice runs first, right? That's why people box, is that they don't want to be in a situation where they write 4 horses in the wrong order. I would argue if you're right more often than you're wrong about the order, you're making a lot more money by not boxing, by betting it in the exact order or with a little manipulation that you like the most. And so I'm a big proponent against boxing. I don't think it's a good thing. I think at the long term, it costs you money, but everyone has their opinion on that. That's personally mine. The other thing I think that you brought up that I think is really important is when you're handicapping for a superfecta, you are not trying to pick the 4 most likely winners in the race. You are trying to pick the horses who are most likely to run in the top 4 in the race. And to me, that is very, very different. You mentioned Final Gambit. I talked about Final Gambit a lot leading up to the Kentucky Derby. I didn't think Final Gambit had very good of a chance to win the race, but he had a high probability of being able to run up into 4th. And when you're looking at horses, like if there's a speed horse who either wins or quits, that's a great horse to have in 1st or not included in your superfecta. If there's a lot of speed in the race, you want to look for closers in the 3rd and 4th spot. If there's not much speed in the race, you expect that speed to hold on. And even if the horse can't win on the front end, they probably are going to finish 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. And so it's important when you're handicapping superfectas to understand the makeup of the race and realize you're not trying to pick the 4 most likely horses to win. You're trying to pick the horses who cross the wire in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, Aaron.
Well, listen, the one thing that you really taught me that I want to touch on what you said there, and you taught me this. You're like, you're better off pressing your opinions. Don't be afraid to be wrong, because when you press your opinions instead of just trying to play it safe, you're going to get paid a lot more money when it comes in. And you go, hey, yeah, you might be wrong. Don't be afraid to be wrong, especially in racing. But when you press and you're right, like you did with your superfecta, then all of a sudden you got a $24 ticket and you're getting $1,600 back. you may have been wrong the last 2 or 3 races, but it doesn't matter at that point, right? So it's always best. And again, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm just not sure. Like, I don't know, that 3rd or 4th horse I like. What if they win? I'm going to hurt myself here if I don't do it this way. Yeah, you might, and that could happen. But in the long run, I'm totally with you. And like I said, you taught me this a long time ago. Hey, you've got opinions, press them. If they're wrong, do it in the next race. You're going to get them right. Like you study it, you can handicap, press those opinions. And I think that's the biggest thing about it here that I could take away from it is make sure, like Somich said, if you really like horses, make sure that your bets show that you really like horses.
Yeah, 5-horse, $1 Superfecta box will cost $120. Betting it the way we bet it last Saturday cost $24. Big difference in the long term. If you're able to hit those $24 tickets, it pays for a lot of them, and you're not wasting money on the box. Thank you very much, everybody, here for joining us on VSiN At The Track Road to the Preakness. Make sure you catch us same time, same place next week, as well as a live Preakness show on Preakness Saturday, just 8 days away.
Okay.
All right, we're back with you here. A little post-show action. I appreciate everyone with the chats coming here over on YouTube as well. The last segment was more of a betting style, and I think a lot of people think horse racing is all about handicapping. How you bet the horses is just as important as how you handicap the horses if you want to try and be profitable and try and beat the takeout that's involved in horse racing. So I appreciate everyone letting us get on our soapbox a little bit there and just talk about the betting side of it, Aaron.
Well, I will tell people this, I've always felt like I was a pretty good handicapper, but I really mean this. Until I kind of met Somich and we kind of talked over stuff like this, I don't think I was the greatest bettor, and I'm still not to Somich's level because I believe you are one of the better bettors in the game, right? So it is not. I think it's more important than handicapping sometimes as well. You still have to be a good handicapper. You still have to know what you're doing. Obviously, you have to get the horses right, but if you don't bet correctly over time, you could get a lot of horses right, and you still may be looking like I didn't make enough money here, right? So, and even like Derby Day, I had more winners than Somich. He made more money than me. That happens all the time because I'm still not to his level as a bettor yet.
That was a good little like reverse compliment there, right? You have more. I was right a couple times on Derby Day, and that pays.
That is
I will
not.
take.
I
know. I'm just
that is the
with
best
you.
compliment you can have as a gambler. I'm sorry, that was not a slap in the face at all.
I will say this: a phenomenal bettor who is a bad handicapper will do better in horse racing than a phenomenal handicapper who is a bad bettor. The betting part long term is the more important part of being profitable. And the most important part of being a better bettor is pressing your opinions and being contrarian. Those are the two things that are long term going to separate you from everyone else who is betting. Because I will tell you this, there's nothing harder when you are starting out than not including the favorite in your bet. Because you're like, but it's the most likely horse to win. And everyone has that same mentality. I got a box, I got to include the favorite. And those are the two biggest mistakes that you can make when you're betting on horses.
Yep. No, you hit it right on the head. And if that was not a backhanded compliment, that was a big compliment because listen, I'm not saying you're a bad handicapper. Of course, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you can maximize it. Even, and like I said, I've learned a lot and I'm better now, but you still can maximize your opinions better than I can. And you're right. Long term, if you're out there making poor wagers, you may get away with it on a weekend or 2 weekends, but if you're going to play every weekend or play every day, you can't. In the end of the day, it's going to come out and get you because you cannot be that precise in racing. It's just impossible to achieve.
It is very tough to be right all the time when you have animals on top of animals running 38 miles per hour in a circle in all different type of track conditions. It's very, very difficult to solve the puzzle correctly every time. And sometimes you solve it correctly and you still find ways to lose. It's what makes horse racing wonderful, Aaron. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here, VSiN At The Track on a Friday afternoon, just 8 days out from the Preakness. Make sure you stay tuned here over at Racing Dudes for all your news leading up to the Preakness at VSiN.com for the articles that are going to come out as soon as we've got this Preakness draw. And join us again next week here, VSiN At The Track, Road to the Preakness. Thank you very much, everyone.